out of academic seminar of PhD students. I'd like to start with single certificate.
Your question. I think that is I'm really happy to be of your professional development as a scientist. The first, I think, is the PhD or something like that. Then it is coming the first publication, but in between you need to learn also because it's usual all work around the submit the project. And to write a project is another category. And I think that you have been successful in this way. I think that is a very good start for your next career. That is why I consider this project as a very important, and thanks to Luka Lacinova, we have this project. And you are the next generation of the people who we believe that will bring the position of the Slovak Academy of Sciences to the higher level as we today have. Anyway, thank you once more again. Congratulations to this success, and can we go to that?
Yes, and now we congratulate Lucia Popovičová from the Institute of Archaeology. From the Institute of Archaeology. And then Sergiu from the Institute of Economic and Social Anthropology. Anastasia Lužianica from the Institute of History. David Reinhard Abila from the Institute of Economic Research. Dominik Kulčar from the Institute of Philosophy. Beata Sobotova from the Center of Social and Psychological Sciences. Barbara Zalešia from the Institute of Slovak Literature. Amit Afzali from the Institute of Geography. Šimon Opravil from the Institute of Geography. Lenka Ondrášová from the Institute of Sciences. Vitaly Ikechukwu Agu from the Mathematical Institute. Daniel Bruchan from the Institute of Physics. Michal Benár from the Institute of Electrical Engineering. Michal Pec from the Institute of Electrical Engineering. Peter Zira from the Institute of Architecture. Alex Leonard from the Biomedical Center. Joseph Jubara from the Biomedical Center. From the Biomedical Center. Andrei Vitala from the Biomedical Center. Andrei Vitala from the Institute of Neuroimmunology.
Yeah.
Nicolai and Moises Silva from the Biomedical Center. Ivana Yurishova from the Center of Biosciences. Julia Jarnovichanova from Molecular Biology. Inga Zhukova from the Institute of Anorganic Chemistry. Rebecca Ragic from the Center of Biosciences. Jan Polacek from the Institute of Molecular Biology. Veronika Grabova from the Institute of Chemistry. Kristiovati Privi-Sakita from the Polymer Institute. Daniela Krajčiová from the Center of Biosciences. Santi Kumar Lenka from the Polymer Institute. Juan Ariun Kale from the Plant Science and Biodiversity Center. These were the people who were fortunate to win Dr. Grant. Now we have several certificates of quality for those who had very good application, but were not financed because of budgetary reasons. And those are Katarina Barachkova from the Institute of Social Anthropology. Joseph Body from the Institute of Earth Sciences. Hussain from the Institute of Electrical Engineering. Jakub Strapec from the Center of Experimental Medicine. And Shanza Zai from the Plant Science and Biodiversity Center. Thank you, Mr. President, for giving the certificate. Thank you for the participation in this program. And now I give Tomáš Domátka, who will accompany you for the rest.
I will, yes. And thank you all for coming. Since you showed up, you cannot leave now. You're trapped here for 2 reasons. The talks will be excellent and there will be pizza afterwards. But you still have like more than an hour to go for the pizza, so you have to sit here and listen to the talks. Those people who didn't show up, it's their fault, right? So you're here, so thank you for coming. This is another edition of the Academy-wide doctoral student seminars. We have 4 talks for you today. We'll start with Michal Kšiňák, who's one of the members of the Presidium, and he will tell us about his story of a young scientist, manager of science, a parent, and apparently a husband as well. So, Michal, the floor is yours. You have about 10 minutes.
Thank you very much.
And you can ask questions afterwards. And I mean, if you have any burning questions, you can obviously ask them during the talk as well, right? There are these microphones, those little balls hanging above you. Those are microphones, apparently. So you can just stand up and speak. If we cannot hear you, I will distribute to you. Okay? If you cannot be heard, then just raise your hand. I will come to you.
So, hello. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to organizers that they give me this opportunity to present my, I would say, story.
Anytime. You have...
Okay. Maybe they will be bored this time, so I don't more than twice. So I would like to point out that I like to present my career. I was not the best student at high school. I mean, now I'm working in the Institute of History, and my grade was like I had 3. I mean, if you are not aware about Slovak grade system, the 1 is the best, and the 5 is the worst grade. So I was like in the middle, and now I'm working as a historian. Also, I had problems with behavior, etc. So it doesn't mean that you have to be the best student at your high school or university to have scientific career. And also, I didn't know when I think I finished high school when I was 18 or 19. I didn't know what to do. Of course, my interests were elsewhere than my future career of party, sport, travel, etc., etc. And I wanted to study economy, and my friend came to me and said, "Michel, let's study French and history. It sounds sexy." I said, "Well, okay, let's try." I passed the exam, the entry exam, and he didn't. So so it was a little bit, it was a bit, I don't know, unfair to him. But thanks to his inspiration, I studied French language and history. And well, I wasn't the best student during the first 3 years. Okay, I was passing all the exams, but I was like hanging around, and it was not very interesting for me. But in the third year, I realized that okay, I really like history. So I started, okay, maybe I will do something in history. And when I was in the 4th year, my professor came to me and told me, "Ah, Misha, there is an opportunity to go to study to Paris." I was like, okay, that's a great opportunity. Of course, I would like to do it. And after finishing my master here in Slovakia, I went to Paris and I did my master at Sorbonne as well. And then I started my PhD studies en co-tutelle under double supervision between Sorbonne University and Bratislava. And at this time, I was really motivated and I was really working hard. So I was also partying a bit, but there was obvious shift in my attitude towards studies. And so and during PhD studies, and this is very important, you have to listen. I spent my PhD studies last 4 years, and out of these 4 years, I spent 3.5 years abroad. And this is a great opportunity also for you, because as you are PhD students, as you could hear, you are the great hope. We hope that you will elevate the level of science in Slovakia and in the whole world. So every institution invests money and effort to support PhD students, and this is obvious mainly from scholarships And for example, once I get 3 different scholarships, and I have to choose which one I will take. So I spend time mainly in France, as I was doing my PhD studies also in Paris. But I spent a lot of time in Prague. When I was in CEFRES, it was like a French research center in Prague, and later on I was in US, in Italy, in Canada, Budapest, etc., etc. So, and why to profit from these opportunities? I mean, first of all, you will learn a new perspective on your field, on your research topic, because mainly in Slovakia, you graduated at the university, and then you go to the Celoakademický of Sciences, and more or less people are, Slovakia is a small country, so you have more or less the same researchers. And for example, when I was in France, I discovered that, okay, their point of view on our history is completely different than ours. And it was great inspiration for you. Of course, there is also a financial aspect, because as you will discover, or you already discovered, or you already learned, like by being scientists in Slovakia, you will not be the richest person in the whole world. And so if you have your scholarship here and you have scholarship abroad, I mean, you can earn some, and you can even save some money. And the third reason I would like to underline is that you will discover new cultures. I mean, you had new people, and it was very exciting for me to travel and to stay in those countries. So I really encourage you to go abroad, and mainly if you are young and you don't have kids, because then when you will have kids, it will be much more difficult, almost impossible. And like from point of view of my career, I focused mainly on Štefánik, who is the Slovak national hero. I published his biography that was translated into French, English, Slovak, and will soon be translated into Czech. It was published by very good publishing houses. That's what's considered in my field as success. And I edited several volumes, etc., etc. And I also taught in Paris at Sorbonne. It was another great opportunity. But then our first son was born. It was a very, very important change in my life, and also in life of our family. On one hand, it's great. It's great opportunity, but you have to count on it that it will completely change your life. You will not have, or you will have much less free time than you had before. And it's also important to underline that you will have to work much more efficiently, because only after I started to work at in the presidium of the Celoakademický of Sciences and having 2 kids, when I had 1 hour, I was working, and I did the work that before and took me, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. So this is really good. And when our son was 1.5 years, I spent 6 months with him at maternity leave, and it was another great experience because it was COVID, everything was closed, and so we were going every day to the forest nearby here in Dubravka, and we were looking at the bees and everything what was around. And then during the COVID, another great opportunity showed up, that I was elected member of the Presidium of the Celoakademický of Sciences, when I'm in charge of international relations, mainly with the cooperation. I'm in charge of the cooperation with France and French-speaking countries, and also of science dissemination, also a lot of other things. And then our second son was born, and I was the first member of Presidium who went on maternity leave, because before it was not common, because before it was mainly dominated by males in their 60s. And so now, as we have this great opportunity in Slovakia, that our social system allows also not only mothers but also fathers to go on maternity leave. I took advantage of it, and I spent another 8 months with my son on maternity leave, and I have to tell you that the second maternity leave was much better than the first one. And I still remember the first day when I stayed at home with him. I was so relaxed, and I just took him from his grid, put him next to me in the bed, and we were exchanging his pacifiers. And like the day before, I had to run to work. I had to do this and that and then. And so it was very for me. It was very very relaxing. And I spent 8 months with him at home, and he slept well. He slept like from 3 to 4 hours during the day. So when he slept, I was able to do my work for Presidium and for our institute. And my maternity leave ended recently. It was by the end of December. And since then, I'm working full time, and my wife is working full time as well. And it's endless improvisation because they are kids when they are in maternal school, maternities in kindergarten. Yes, thank you. And in nursery, they're always sick. And so we have to find a way how to deal with it. And they of course they get sick when you expect it, and when it's less suitable for you. So during the weeks that you are the most busy, and your wife as well. So this is my short presentation of my story of historian and manager of science and father. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask.
If you have any questions on how to succeed at high school, how to go on a paternity leave, how to write a book about Stefanik, ask now. Why is the best time to have kids during a pandemic? If you are thinking about having a kids ever, just wait for the next one. Maybe that works. You have an opportunity now. So how many books are you writing now?
Well, during the maternity leave, I finished one in French. It should be published soon. On a French military mission in Czechoslovakia after World War I. And well, now I'm actually writing a paper, very interesting paper. But as we have 2 kids, and as I'm working in Presidium, it takes ages, as you know. Yes.
Profession of your, how is her career proceeding?
She's auditor in PwC. So, and she has busy season. They call it busy season, but it starts in September and it ends in June. So it's basically the whole year. And they are saying, "Oh, we have busy season now. We have to take care of kids because I have busy season." But their busy season it's during the whole year. And of course, her career had to slow down a little bit, not only because of kids, but also because of COVID pandemics. And she complained that it's more difficult with kids to develop properly her career, but I still think it's somehow possible. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. And of course, she's working like not full time. She's working 80%, but I think it's just nominally they call it 80% because she has to do her job, and well, officially she doesn't have to be there 8 hours, but unofficially I don't think it makes any difference.
Thank you all for all the exciting questions. Andre.
How many months you stayed on each internship you have in France? You was in other countries, but how many months you stayed there?
How many grants?
No, months.
Months. Okay. So I counted. I had 9 months in Paris during my master thesis. 6 months in Paris during my PhD studies, 3 years in Prague, 5 months in the US, 1.5 months in Rome, 1 month in Canada, and 2 months in Budapest, and 5 months in Lille. So it was very different also from, like, when I was in for the first time for master's thesis, I got like scholarship from the French government, and it covered all the period that lasted my master studies. And there is also another great opportunity that French government offers, like thèse en co-tutelle scholarships. So they pay you, it's for 3 years, not for 4 years, but they pay you 3 times, like 3 years in a row, a half year in France. So like, and this is that's good, but I didn't get this scholarship because I didn't ask for it, because I needed to be in Prague, where because the archives that I had to examine were in Prague.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
And we'll switch to our main speakers, and we'll start talking about sex. There's going to be a slight change in schedule. So Miroslava Šuďa-Žilinská from the Institute for Research in Social Communication will tell us all we need to know about boundaries in sex, I think. So title cells. So let's hear it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Start your presentation. You also start.
Yeah, sharing the screen.
And doing something in the chat.
I see.
Chat. Since you're in control now. That's fine.
No need to apology for being late for online meeting.
And you have 20 minutes.
I will try to. Great, thank you.
That's almost stop here.
Okay, thank you very much, because now I'm tempted by the previous speakers to tell you more about how to finish your PhD doing research and gave birth to 2 kids, because that's possible too. Not, I wasn't traveling that much, but raising 2 small babies during PhD research, it is also the funny opportunity. And definitely I can tell you it is possible if you have the support from the institute, but at the same time you have to be prepared that, of course, during the day when you have some kind of a presentation, like today, both kids are sick and you have to come home early. So I will be the person leaving the presentation, but do not hesitate to contact me anytime you are more interested by the topic. What is wanted boundaries in sex? And to be honest, of course, my PhD research is guided by more maybe honest or scientific word, like the original title of my research is Boundaries in Sex and Sexual Subjectivity in Women, Feminist Relational Discourse Analysis. But as I realized that probably in the audience, we will have mostly professionals and colleagues from different fields, I decided not to present that much the specific concept I am working with, but to only point out the most important preliminary findings from my research. So, but to put my research into the context, probably you are all familiar with the so-called campaign or initiative Me Too, which raised several years ago. And you can have different attitudes and feelings regarding the campaign, which actually were describing different experiences, mostly by women, describing some boundary crossing situations or situations of violence. And of course, the campaign itself brought so many discussions regarding what are actually boundaries in sexual interaction, and when is the proper time to raise our voices when the boundaries is crossed, how come some people are able to talk about their experience after years and years, and therefore the situation of feeling or getting some justice is more and more complicated. But for me, the campaign itself is important from the psychological perspective, because I am originally was working in the psychology field, because somehow, whether we agree with the campaign or not, or whether we like it or not, it definitely opened up a discussion about how we actually understand the concept of sexual experience and how we define sexual violence. And we know those things are even, diverse within different countries. What is our own understanding? Do we believe there is something as a so-called gray area in sexual interaction, something which is probably not yet sexual violence, at the same time somehow problematic? How do we understand that? How do we experience those kinds of situations? And of course, the whole term gray area can be complicated because somehow it is used to excuse, for example, sexual violence. But at the same time, for me as a psychologist, it is giving us an opportunity to open up our definition outside the dominant understanding what is just sex and what is sexual violence. But to be clear, I have to situate my understanding of sexual interaction and sexual boundaries in the context of, social and psychological understanding. Therefore, even though we know that sexual interactions somehow are biologically rooted, at the same time, we know that our lives is significantly influenced by social meanings. And I will give you an example. For example, puberty. We know that we are there are hormones from the biological perspective. At the same time, we are prepared to have sexual intercourse and to procreate. But of course, we can have a discussion what is the proper age to engage in sexual interaction. And here, even by laws, we can see that this is something which is culturally rooted. This is socially constructed ideas, what we think is, for example, proper or in sexual interaction. So my research on sexual boundaries is actually rooted in this idea that, of course, our interactions are situated within existing social context, and that our interactions are influenced by the different levels of how we actually create certain understanding in those situations. So I was working with a so-called sexual script theory, which is actually stating that we are, operating with different kinds of scripts in our interactions. Like there are some, for example, cultural assumed shared meanings about, for example, token resistance is so important issue in the boundaries in sex, because in Slovakia and probably in other countries too, it's like a popular joke that when a woman says no, she means yes. And of course we can say but that's the joke, but somehow we are influenced by this perspective that maybe sometimes there is some kind of play in sexual interaction, and we don't need to take seriously, for example, refusal in sexual interaction. But of course, those cultural scripts are quite general. So in the usually daily interaction, people are creating their own meanings, their own rules in sexual interaction. But mostly, I was interested in the level of so-called intra-psychic scripting. How in our inner world we are creating the idea that we have certain desired boundaries, certain expectations from our sexual life. So as a psychologist, I was more interested at those very personal level. How is it happening that we are thinking about boundaries in sex? Because if we want to truly experience our sexuality in psychology, and not only in psychology, we are using sexual activity, how we are constructing narratives about our subjective sexual experiences, how is it that we are becoming sexual subjects, not only engaging in sexual interaction, but somehow feeling them, experiencing them. And from previous research within psychology, we know that if we want to truly experience our authentic sexual experiences and subjectivity, we have to know and somehow touch our boundaries. And therefore, the situation can be very tricky because there could be some situation and we have to manage it somehow. And often it is not only about whether we are able to communicate boundaries with my partner, with our partners, but at the same time to communicate or negotiate those boundaries within ourselves. So, when I'm talking about boundaries, this is very only quickly defining that it's not only about like sexual practices, because probably this is the first thing which came to our mind when we are talking about boundaries in sex. But it is like, again, very complex dimensions of wanting, consenting, desiring sexual interactions, because often all those sexual negotiation is happening in the world which is somehow rooted again with unwritten rules about what we think is sex, what we think is love, what are the gender roles, for example, what are the expectations in our relationship. And from previous research, we again know that unfortunately women are engaging in unwanted sexual interactions, and often it is even described as a form of emotional labor. Even in the stable marriages and partnership, there are interactions which are not fully wanted actually, and there is a very complicated dynamic with it. So I decided I want to learn more about it. How is it happening that some women are crossing their boundaries in sex? And so my research aim was to gain deeper understanding how middle-aged women construct and negotiate those boundaries in sexual interaction. And I was mostly interested in to that process, looking at their own experience with sexual subjectivity. And why did I decide to study women and why middle-aged women? So why women? Very briefly, because mostly from research we know they are more likely to experience sexual violence, but at the same time there are like ethical and practical reasons that I, as a woman, that will be probably much more complicated to make interviews with about their sexual life. Not to say, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that it's not important to study sexual interaction among men, of course. That's probably my future recommendation for research, but I had only three years and 2 kids, so I managed to decide for studying women. And why middle-aged women? Because not surprisingly, most psychological research regarding sex and sexual interactions is actually done on university and college women. And there is like a gap in understanding how women who are a bit older, let's say, and have more experience are, for example, in stable relationships, they have families, how they actually manage those type of very significant situations in their lives. So I did some interviews and in the interviews, I was more interested in how actually they experience different memories regarding their sexual interactions. And at the same time, I was doing focus groups because I wanted to know how actually women in Slovakia talk about sex, how they talk about boundaries. Because in those focus groups, I could maybe look closer on those assumed shared meanings, what we believe boundaries actually in sex are. And I was using also research agency, so I had an opportunity to move outside of the women I know who are willing to talk about sex, because you can understand probably this is like the first limitation, the fact that some women are not even able to talk about these issues, and probably those women are not part of my research. but women's research agency for recruitment gave me the opportunity to meet women, which I wouldn't have a chance to actually contact. Therefore, I had also opportunity to, for example, meet women outside the capital, outside the groups having only university degree and so on. And here I would like to present some of my results on how do we, as women in middle age, and I am already middle age also, how do we talk about boundaries in sex? And I defined, based on my analysis from interviews and focus groups, like 4 categories, how we understand boundaries. And I labeled them as normality and deviance, illusion of perfect compatibility, communication, and intersubjective construct. And I will zoom a bit on all of these categories. So when women are talking about boundaries as something which is a matter of normality versus deviant behavior, it means like they are constructing boundaries, like there is no need to talk because we are normal. Like boundaries in sex, we are not even thinking about it because probably boundaries is an issue for those with some special sexual needs. And this type of speech actually creates a situation where partners are only using mostly using those cultural scripts, expecting scenarios how sex should, for example, exist. And often this results into what I labeled missing subjectivity, like actually hesitating to even describe our own experience with sexual being actually. Often those women are fully engaging with, for example, cultural script regarding like sex is like a marital obligation. This is something which needs to happen if we are married. And it doesn't matter whether we feel it, whether we want it. It should be a part of our, almost daily interaction. So at the same time, some women found during their narratives that this is quite limiting. They probably experience divorce or some sort of sexual violence, and they understand, okay, boundaries is something, it is something we probably need to define, but at the same time, they relate that like, if we are a perfect couple, again, there is no need to talk. Boundaries probably exist, but I, with my partner, I don't need to actually discuss them because we love each other and that's enough. And probably this gives us more opportunity to like engage in psychological feeling with our sexuality, but at the same time, again, it creates like the huge pressure to engage in certain expectations. For example, what is love? How do we expect that the relationships are evolving during years of mutual life and so on? So again, it creates a certain taboo around communication and sex. And both these constructions of boundaries I found very limited. And even those women, when they were describing their like history or sexual history, in certain moment they said that this was limiting. They need new meanings to describe their life experience. And therefore they were moving towards describing boundaries as an issue or as a matter of communication, which I would label like, okay, if you don't like something, you have to say it. Those were moments when women somehow try to empower themselves in interaction with their partners. They were using what I labeled like post-feminist discourse, therefore realizing that they need to become equal partners, but at the same time, they completely ignore that actually we are living in situations and a world which is not like equal, and there are like power imbalances, and there are complicated situations in which women cannot speak up, for example. So I had very bizarre situation where a woman was describing her experience with marriage, which I would say had some or had many boundary crossing situations, and she was at the same time using this very biological meanings that, okay, I was his wife, I had to engage in sexual interaction, even though it wasn't wanted or desired. And at the same time, after leaving this relationship, she was able to identify that that was problematic. And at the same time, she wasn't able to like self-compassion for self-compassion to understand that in that situation, she couldn't actually speak up for herself. And she mostly applied then in her talk very cruel discourse among other women, for example, or for other women who were experiencing sexual violence. And that was very interesting for me. How come that even a person who experienced very complicated interactions weren't able to reflect to what extent actually somehow we are limited to set boundaries in our interactions. And the last way I'm going to talk about boundaries, where boundaries as intersubjective concept. It was the moment in the interviews when those women realized that, well, it can be very complicated. And if we want a relationship where we are equal partners, we should care about each other. And that doesn't mean that we have to say no all the time. It doesn't mean we have to say yes all the time to sexual interaction. But we are open to talk about it verbally. We are open to evaluate our own experience. And this is what, for me and psychologically, I labeled as critical lived subjectivity. Not meaning that believing in intimacy in relationship will prevent any harm, but at the same time, it creates opportunities to even mutually within the partners reflect how is their relationship, how is it evolving, what interactions they prefer and what kind of interactions they don't prefer, and it provides much more freedom. And okay, so I labeled like two extremes, like very missing subjectivity and something which is more dynamic, more lived, more critical subjectivity. And I was interested, how come that some women tended to spend their lives in one category and some women are able to move? And here you can see some of the moments which I identified were important if we want to have opportunity to feel, acknowledge, explore our experiences, to evaluate, to act or define against accepted cultural norms. We are definitely will be able to move to more critical and live the subjective experience. At the same time, that doesn't mean we are ignoring our partners, but we are with them mostly at the intersubjective level. We are equal partners, and it is upon us to have the agreement. And on the other side, we see if we are self-doubting, if we are lacking critical evaluation, that's probably the way to actually lose the possibility to experience our sexual subjectivity. And last on this slide, I hope my results will be able to be applied in some counseling processes and education program, and maybe one day, hopefully also policy making, reflecting the very complicated and complex issue of boundaries and sex. And thank you very much for your attention. Here are some of my results.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Actually, plenty. You can probably just
Thank you for your research conversation. I just want to ask about the ethical aspects of this research, because we know when we talk it's very related with sexual violence, victim blaming, and when we talk about boundaries and conversation with women about violence and sex. We not have get this responsibility for this conversation for women, because now it's a lot of society when we saying this, it's also look like a little bit like women should conversate about. Women should have boundaries in like sexual behavior. What do you think about it?
Thank you very much. Actually, I didn't have enough time to talk more about the ethical aspect of my research, but it was extremely important. And before I start, I had like several months of actually thinking with my supervisor how to frame my research. So it won't harm participants, because that's also the risk. Like talking about your experiences, which are boundary setting, could be, for example, a situation when you firstly realized you had this experience of sexual violence, or not mentioning that in Slovakia actually we have a law that if you are aware of, for example, of sexual violence happening, you have obligation to report to police, which is actually bizarre, because yeah, I want to, for example, provide my participants anonymity, safety, and at the same time, legally, probably I should report them, even though they are victims of violence. So there were so many ethical aspects. And for me, what I tried to do was like a harm reduction approach. Therefore, I prepared for all the participants. They had like, of course, the informed consent, but the attachment of the consent was full of helping resources. Like if you are experiencing any kind of not feeling good or something like that, here are like free contacts which you can contact. At the same time, after the interviews, I was always trying to make sure that participants are feeling enough, like good. And each participant I try to meet twice, because I realized like there can be like some follow-up after what we started. So I had like two situations where women actually were describing violence with their previous partners. And after the interviews, I was like, okay, this is something where I am stopping my research position, and here I am lucky to be also a psychologist, so I was brave enough to talk a bit with those women about, these experiences. Probably you feel that this wasn't okay for you, and this, for many people, they would understand this was violence now, and how you experience it now, how you feel now. And I did something like crisis intervention, I would say. And this is, I believe, this is very important to be aware of it. Even though I, for example, wanted to study only women who were not reporting having the experience with sexual violence, because I was more interested about like honest experience, how they think about boundaries in sex. At the same time, that unrealistic expectation. If you have 10 women, probably at least two of them will have boundary crossing situation, which would be, even by very conservative Slovak law, would be defined as a sexual violence. And they are not aware of it, actually, or they are suppressing that information in their records. So it is very challenging. And I would recommend to everyone who wants to study this kind of issues to have very many weeks to discuss with their colleagues how to manage it. So they do this harm reduction strategy. So sorry for a long answer.
It's okay.
For myself, I have a simple question. I have noticed that you use gradient and shower in your presentation.
And is there any symbolism behind it, or is just the coincidence?
Oh, okay. No, actually, that was the layout, was the institutional layout I used. I know those are, yeah, somehow related to the topic, but no, it wasn't. Okay. I didn't realize it was not.
Shared all opinion of the Institute. Sure.
Thank you for your presentation. I observed that you used your subject is between the age of 35 to 40 or 46 or okay, 54 or something like that. And I would like to know your study area. Is it in Bratislava or in Slovakia or in another country? And if it's in another country, what is the legal age for marriage for the girls for the girls in that country? And if let's assume the legal age is between 18, from 18 years and above, as it is in some country, you may consider also involving such age, since this sexual discourse is focused on marriage, legal for those who are married. So you may consider including such age. And also, did you investigate how social trend influence sexual discourse among these age groups? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will try to remember because there are like two aspects for me. So I researched women mostly in Bratislava and nearby area. I was able to contact some women from also other parts of Slovakia, but only Slovakia was the country where I searched women. And of course, the legal age for marriage here, I believe, is a bit sooner than 18 if you have a consent from your parents, but let's say 18 years old. But for me, the psychological trend, like what is labeled in psychological research as middle-aged women, meaning they have some sort of psychological development finished, is usually in research labeled by 35 years old till 54, 54 years old. But yes, I want to relate to your comment regarding the social trends regarding sexuality, because this was something I wasn't aware of before, and now I did some research, that in Slovakia probably I would use different age categories if I would be doing the research again, because even though those women were experiencing very similar life trajectories regarding middle age, but women in their 50s, they have adolescence, puberty during the communist regime. And the younger women were actually having adolescent years after the revolution in Slovakia. And that was a huge difference, how actually they get information about sex, how many information they got from their communities, school, and so on. And it created quite a huge difference on how actually social discourse on sexuality is changing. Like women in their 50s, the first partner was their husband, actually. Younger women, they had more sexual experiences, more partners, because it was much more open not to actually marry the first man they started to date, for example, So this was something I was actually, witnessing during doing the research. Thank you.
Yeah, I will just add some 2 points to what he asked actually, because we all told about social trend, but I also want to ask you also this, because you had a lot of constants when you're doing your research, you're looking at particular age group, particular like it should be legally married woman, if and also like heterosexual couples you're looking at. So did you also check based on different social status, like we have different social status countries, right? So based on that, or if the like whatever your research was, they're different, and also because the based on the what I want to ask one more thing is that the marriage, like let's say in it's because legally if you're not married also you can stay as a couple, like those living relationship kind of things. So do you think that those couples will have different training compared to those who are legally married ones? So like this is what.
Thank you very much. The first question is very good because it is touching the main limitation of my research. And even though I was applying feminist perspective on my research, which means not only being curious about how gender enters the stories, but also other identities like minorities, ethnicity, religion, for example. So I was asking and trying to find out where they are situated within certain social context, but at the same time, I have to be honest that my group wasn't that diverse as it could be. So I could, for example, apply more intersection perspective on that. That's a huge limitation. And the second question was regarding like marriage versus relationship, whether they are using different frames for the sexual interaction. And I was quite surprised that no, actually, even young women in long-term relationships, they are somehow applying the script of marital sex, even though they are not married. It was like the legal aspect wasn't even important for them. For them, it was like maybe they were more rooted in those romantic discourse. Like if we have a good relationship, the sex is like the obligatory part of it, because if we don't have it, or if we have some troubles, probably it destroys the illusion of perfect relationship. Therefore, the legal differences were not that relevant. Thank you very much for that question.
Thank you. So one final question. You included 29 participants in your study.
Yeah.
How many did you exclude?
No one.
No one. Because you said that some women were not willing to talk about sex and about these things. So those were probably not included.
Yeah, those were not included.
How many were those?
Okay. For me, I maybe contacted 5 more women who decided not. No, it's not many.
Thank you. So thanks again. If you have any questions, please ask during the pizza time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All those people who are online, who are watching and listening to us online, please, if you have any questions, just start speaking. Do not write them in the chat because we might miss them in the chat, including those questions about how to fix the slides. Thank you. So our next speaker is Konstantin Celoakademický from the Institute of Hydrology, and we'll switch from sex to street flooding in Trebišov in eastern Slovakia, and he will tell us something about a green infrastructure perspective on how to solve flooding.
For this second presentation, I have really little idea how I ended up. Let's try. The first thing I have to do is
Which to very useful. So we start with the events here. You had a wonder, but people will not see it.
at least that's okay. It's not working in with. Okay. So my presentation is not going to be as sexy, and we're going to also switch from form France, the previous lesson, to maybe not that form Slovak Republic, just a quick teleporter to. So a quick teleporter. So here's our object research. There, indeed. So the presentation didn't really want to go there, but it's still a lovely city. So we're gonna visit it anyway.
Technically the city, yeah.
Yeah, it's called Celoakademický, and as you can see here, the population of around 23,000 people, and the range of the area, which is more than part for me, is 300, more or less 400 hectares. And so the thing here is the system which is by the main system which I'm now dealing with. And I've been dealing with modeling of the sewer system and the flooding which can be close to it due to rain different intensities, and how we can actually mitigate this problem and what it can cause for cities and how we can deal with it in fashion. What's a bit about the data? We've been analyzing the cover of the city, and we also created the map of impervious areas within the city, and we also identified the possible location for infrastructure implementation, but it's going to be a bit later. And so when I close the city, as we can see here, it has around 960 points, no shifts, and the vibes, one station, station. And about this, I'm going to talk about a bit later. And we can much larger, but it's important because all the water which is not collected from the city at some point is going directly there. So if we can even catch some of this, it can save us money just to not even by flooding, but just by not treating the water which cannot be just sucked on the street, some buildings, and used furthermore somewhere else. Okay, which software we use? It's Mike, which is integrated water modeling platform, which allows us to also hydraulic and geological modeling. I think people are smiling, so maybe just yeah, it's just about they've been with it, and I want to talk much about the map, but the main difference that you have to know that in this problem now for this research, we've been using two different type of modeling. It's first of all it's a bit simpler, time array photographs, which doesn't require very much data and allows faster calculate for all the parameters in the city, but for proper and more detailed analysis, we used cinematic wave equation, and this one allows us to determine more properly how the water goes from the ground with the network, how fast it goes, and how much retention every type of infrastructure, every type of ground cover we can achieve or we already have with on the subcatchments. Okay, we've been using setup range. Just to show that we have separated range, which means that we have 100 years, and in this 100 years can happen rain which happen approximately 20 times it's 1 in 5 years. It might happen with 10 liter per second per hectare. It means that okay, it's not happening really often, but that's something that we should consider as engineers when we are dealing with modernization and with building of a new part of the system, and when we're trying to understand and estimate the durability. So later on, structural development scenarios. Let's finally talk about something which goes there. So first of all, it's green. We've been dealing with green roofs, and we identified our large buildings which are in municipalities or belongs to industry, which is not private owners, which is much easier to convince them to change something in the perspective. And also, a large paved areas, which mostly around the malls, around those industrial parks, which is possible to cover with permanent pavement with no real harm and with no such high costs for construction and maintenance. Furthermore, just say that you have to change all the roads. That's not going to work, and the standards, the maintenance of both of them. The total area covered by this proposed changes is a bit less than 5%. Okay, that's fine. That's how you look at it here, where it's possible to in the city. As you can see, it's not bigger, but also we should understand that establishment will mostly have also gardens and private households all around the city. So we cannot change the city everywhere. But it's not also necessary. Okay, the results. You're scared of the table, I'm scared of the truth, so we're basically not more of it. But the main thing here is to understand that changing colors from the very first column in the each cube, the very last column in each cube. Because as you can see, the colors are a bit greener or lighter, so it means the yeah. Now we're going to go to the graphs and you're going to see it much better. Yeah, the same here. You technically can change something, but I've seen this maps 1,000 times, 100 times, and I still wouldn't be able to count all of them. It's just a big difference just to say that, okay, we have problematic areas in the okay, this area as well is a bit problematic, and also partially here. So as you can see here, that's one of the possible changes, and there are much less red dots over this part. Okay, it's like this, makes sense. Okay, this part, and but let's show it in the graphs how we can talk about this. That's the reduction. That means that, okay, with rain of which happens like in 100 years, let's say 50 times, which 1 in 2 years, we can change and reduce the amount of flooded points up to 40% or even more, depending on the source. And that's rather significant amount, considering the fact that we only changed around 5% of the territory. So in numbers from around 40 or in some cases up to 75 years, up to also 40 or 20. So that's a significant change. And don't look at this. We're gonna deal with this. It's the curious part here.
So you still talking about so what's going to happen in 10 years if you
that's results of the modeling. So yeah, that's the results of the modeling. And okay, I'll explain it a bit one more time. So basically, as you can see here, we have the current state, which is, let's say, 100%, and we can say that, okay, with the rain of which happens once in 3 years, we can reduce our number with rain rate. This it might last 15 minutes. It's going to be more than rain. Very much. Even if it's like a small amount of water, it's going to go much faster. The velocity is much bigger, larger than it is in the rain, which will last for 2 hours. And you can see here the approximate effectiveness for most of the. It's actually with parallel payment. So as you can see, just parallel payment, and it also allows us to decrease the number of flooded points by almost 40%. Here you can see no such curious curve anymore with green roofs, and it's perfectly aligned, and that's what we mean that we can expect such result that, okay, if we'll make the green roofs on the areas which we investigated, it's possible to say that the amount of water, even with the rain of high intensity, even with the really heavy rains like the one which flooded Bratislava, it will not solve all our problems, but it will allow us to decrease the amount of flooded points and the amount of respectfully flooded streets within the city, up to around 10% here, and mostly 5, of course. But in the more preferable and much more common scenarios, the effectiveness of them is still around 15, 20%, and higher up to. Again, now last one, that's combined scenarios of both of them. So as you can see here, we can see this point. This was caused by the thermal payments. And why? Okay, let's talk about this point finally. Why it is here and what we can do is that because it's not only about the in this particular model, in this particular case, it's 120 minutes. It just happened that the nodes are not flooded entirely, but they're just below the ground level. So basically, if you take into account all the nodes which are just above the ground level and they haven't been like this way in other models, we're gonna have just normal curve again. Okay, let's make a fast thing. Okay, you want water? I need to provide you water. You can see here water. Just pay attention to this one. This is the waves, and this is the spot. It's going when this spot, one like this. But this the water goes directly, and it's not efficient because efficient water goes the minimum amount of water, which up to this point goes to the water. All this water goes directly. So you also have to take this into the account and understand that okay, the use of infrastructure, we cannot also and we cannot avoid all the combined flows. That's how it calls. But we can reduce, for example, in this case, we can reduce the duration of it for 15 minutes maybe, or something like this. It's even with the heavy rain, because it just allows us to spread the water more evenly the system, and it just doesn't overflow the allowed amount of water. So we can just make our even thinner, and this way, which is beneficial for environment in general, which is beneficial for fishery, and also beneficial, of course, for different kind of companies, because they are responsible. Companies which should be such. Another one, last math, which told you that's for the next presentation. That's the amount of water which we also have to deal, because okay, I mentioned that there are nodes which are flooded, but they're flooded differently. And so they can see here the amount of water which goes, which about the ground might differ as a significant. Here is just 15. Here is just 15 cubic meters, and here is 6 times more just in this area. With the help of the infrastructure, we can reduce its number up to more or less normal, and we can assume that we can predict with some amount of certainty that it will allow us to help with this data. Okay, so the conclusions. But the fact that actually Rebishov now are relatively has no such threats of flooded currently, but first of all, urbanization and rapid growing of the city itself might change it anyway. First, second of all, urbanization and the amount of paved areas within the city, which is going to increase instead of, in our case, decrease with green structure. It might expose the overflowing and might cause more streets to flooded. And also one crucial thing, that's, I guess, what you wanted to hear all the time, global climate change. One more crucial topic for the day. It also works for redistribution of the rain's intensity. So we can have the same amount of rain, but if it's not going to go like within the day, but within 15 minutes, that's going to be, as you've seen from the graphs, entirely different consequences for the city. But also, the city has a more big potential for suitable for green structure. And the remedy of this is just two parts, which are main, just spatial, that's why we chosen them, will allow us to decrease in the gentle range from what we've been researching here, which is still quite heavy. It will allow us to change it up to 40% of what is expected under current conditions. So that's the streets that are flooded. Okay, in the future, we are having considered other benefits of infrastructure, which of course are beneficial and comfortable for people and cooling. That's a topic for another research. Okay, in the future, the study conducted a detailed analysis of the impact of the infrastructure on the flow of untreated water through the weirs and spillways, actually, and compare it the results to data from other cities, just to understand that, okay, it's not a glitch for just Trebišov, but it's also possible to implement in areas like, for example, Prešov, or even like much bigger cities like Bratislava, which are in much higher threat, but the required amount of data is much larger than we have. Okay, so the last is acknowledgement, because these two companies allowed me to use their software and the data from your network. Also, they provided the calibrated data to have the results actually suitable, not just the prediction from this taken from the sky. And I do appreciate your attention, and I do hope for your questions, because that's definitely not enough suitable explanations for. Of course, you can rest here. And, yeah.
Thank you. Any questions about flooding?
Green roofs are a nice solution for the future, but they are pretty heavy, especially when soaked with water. So are the buildings in Trebišov strong enough to hold green roofs?
That's a great question. And of course, far from all the buildings are possible to implement the green roofs on, especially big and especially big enough to withstand, to have a significant impact on the flooding. But first of all, the roofs require sometimes renovation, and of course we are mainly dealing with the municipal large buildings which require renovation more often, and with industrial buildings like factories which might include furthermore in their project of renovation or in their project of they might include it and change this project accordingly, change that accordingly to norms and also bring roofs on this. Because as I mentioned, it's not only also only beneficial for flooding reduction, it's also beneficial for them in terms of the costs, because this costs money to give water, to just give water into this network. They are paying for this now, so that's one benefit. Another benefit is cooling, which is nice benefit. Cooling, air pollution reduction. So not all the buildings, but we consider that the buildings we've been looking at this research, they might be not in terms of 1 year, 2 years, but in mid-term perspective, there might be renovated enough to withstand additional load.
I missed one thing. So why did you pick Trebišov? Why? What was the motivation?
So motivation project is to understand, first of all, to estimate the conditions of the soil problem and to check the amount of check it on the local conditions, how it works here. Second of all, this such research requires amount of data which are just impossible to collect by hand, even if we would like to. So we have to consider which cities already have any project evaluation and any digital model of their sewer network, just for us to be able to produce proper research on this. Furthermore, we're going to develop this based on results from this part to analysis. So now there are already levels, for example, as I mentioned, threshold and flood data, and that's.
What do you know? Would you say that Trebišov is a typical city in Slovakia, or is it in some ways different? When it comes to flooding, it's different in many ways.
When it comes to flooding, that's the plain city, so it has much less risk at the moment, but at the same time, it has a great potential for infrastructure. So that's additional benefit for our research. But it also might give us an example of how the cities in Slovakia behave for such researches, and also it has very similar functions with even some cities which we can see here, not in the mountain region, not in Bratislava, but in cities like Pezinok. We can work. Okay, it's near the mountain, but you got the point. So. In such small towns here, it's possible to compare it with this. Of course, the range will be different, all the parameters will be different, but the main patterns are similar, and it's possible to use, or at least predict.
Also, you made some sort of recommendations to Trebišov about what to do with the green infrastructure and pavements and everything. Were those recommendations conveyed to them in any way?
That's in
process. Do they know about that?
Yeah.
Do they know about these recommendations, Trebišov?
So not yet, because actually this data has been collected, and with cooperation with GHI, we collected the data and prepared the model of the city very recently. So basically, you're not the one first who's seen this results in such form for Trebišov, but one of them for solitaries.
So very so.
Yeah.
What questions? Brilliant question. You guys have no green roofs. You have never flooded before.
It's not. There's no water.
Don't move to Trebišov.
Nice talk. My question is like talking about flood, but I didn't get it right. You were talking about flood caused by the poor rainfall, or the flood that is caused by river, something like or more. And another thing I want to know, like you're talking about the model. This model you're talking about is like able to apply to other cities, which like based on your model, do it. Who they need to consider? The thing I didn't get is like when it comes to the river flood, that
that's not river floods. That's exactly floods which goes to the actually, it's rain, but more or less, but these floods are caused by our tsunami and maybe network in cities like Trebišov, not in all cities, but Trebišov it is. So it collects also water from the household and water drainage. So when the water declines are higher than the capacity of the pipes, it just care about the ground level in the manholes, and just on the street you can see the paddles around the sheet and that's what I'm researching.
It's about like drainage system.
Yeah, that's
okay. But it's okay.
There are different patterns, and it's difficult to control with the infrastructure. But it's also not necessary because in rivers we can provide other benefits. But cities can to make a border in the street, and here you have a 1 meter high border and do whatever you want. Thank you. The second one, just a brief one, the graphs and the tendencies of infrastructure efficiency. They're going to be valid for more or less different conditions. city with same condition. But of course, for each particular city, we would require to use the same procedure maybe, but with different infrastructure, with different pipe capacity, with different slope. That's always impossible to say every day. This would be exactly always others.
And I would just like to point out that you can also ask questions about the things you liked or disliked in the presentation. So about the way of presenting, the way the graphs are presented, and that applies to all the talks, right? So your questions cannot be, don't have to be only about the topic of the presentation, but also about the way of conveying information. Just pointing that out. Any other question?
From the colleague here. This was partly the...
That's what we do today at this point, yes. Any other questions? If not, thank you again for coming. Thank you for the talk. The microphone is on.
Last speaker
should be came from the Plant Center and Plant Science and Biodiversity Center, where they study plants, I think. And they will tell us about something about island aviation and community of plants. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I will detail it.
20 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you for giving me the platform to talk about my PhD research work. I am Shubhi Mishra. I'm a PhD student at Plant Science and Biodiversity Center of Slovak Academy of Sciences. So before going into my PhD topic, I would... Okay. So I would briefly introduce what I did before my PhD in math. I have my bachelor degree in biotechnology from India, where I studied the antioxidant levels of Nyctanthus, flowering plant under lead stress. Then I had my master's degree in agricultural biotechnology, that's also from India. The research work of my master's thesis I did in Italy as an Erasmus stay, where I was working on the gene expression of metabolism genes of glucosinolated in rocket under different biotic stresses. Then I have a post-master's research experience where I was involved in the gene sequencing of Tenebrosha ilsa and Celoakademický. These are the two fish species where I was involved in the project. They were doing the sequencing of those. Then after that, I started my PhD here in 2020 during the COVID period. The topic of my PhD is impact of chronic ionizing radiation on the resilience power of aquatic plants to pests and pathogens. So before going into the results of this topic, I will give a short introduction of the three main parts of this project: ionizing radiation, plant, and biomass. So what is ionizing radiation? Ionizing radiations are particles or electromagnetic waves that have short wavelength and high energy in comparison to the non-ionizing radiation, because they should be capable to remove the electrons from atoms that non-ionizing radiation cannot do. There can be two types of ionizing radiation: particle-based and electromagnetic wave-based. Alpha particles and beta particles are the examples of particle-based ionizing radiation, and gamma rays and X-rays are the examples of electromagnetic wave-based ionizing radiation. The sources of ionizing radiation can be broadly divided into two categories: natural resources and anthropogenic radiation. So cosmic radiations are natural resources. All the time we receive high energy particles either from sun or other galaxies on Earth. Due to the bombardment of these particles, they are the source of natural resources. Apart from this, the terrestrial radiation. The soil, water, earth, rocks, they have radioactive substances such as thorium, uranium. They always release some radioactive particles that expose up to minor amount of natural radiation. Then the anthropogenic radiation sources. These are the radiation sources that are created due to the human activity. Examples are atomic test sites, nuclear experiment sites, and daily use equipment such as medical equipment. 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, Chernobyl in Ukraine, and Fukushima Daiichi in Japan are the example of nuclear experiment sites, where my project is mainly focused on the Chernobyl experiment site in Ukraine that happened in 1986. The flora and fauna of the Chernobyl are still showing evidence of the presence of radionuclides there even after the more than 30 years of investigation. So, how the plants are responding to this ionizing radiation? When the plants are exposed to ionizing radiation, either through air or the soil, they experience genetic damage. There could be single or double-stranded damages, chromosomal aberration. They have molecular changes where the proteins are modified even after translation. Then there can be cellular response. There are high oxidative stress, and plants may synthesize different antioxidants depending on the species. The phenotype of the plant may get modified. The fertility may get increased. The plant height may get varied. The seed dormancy may increase. And these characters can be inherited to the next generation if they are forwarding genetically. Then the plant immunity can also get compromised due to the long-term radiation exposure. My project is mainly focused on this compromised plant immunity. Then, how this plant pathogen infection works? When the plants are attacked by the pests or pathogens, the biomaterials that are secreted by these pathogens are utilized by the plant, and the primary effects of the plants get activated, avoid or kill these pathogens. Then, in response, pathogens synthesize species-specific proteins to continue their infection. And then, as a response, the plant also synthesizes starts the secondary disease. And whoever is living in the situation depending upon the species of the plant and the species of the pathogen that they are infected. If the plant is resistant, then they can tolerate the level of resistance. If the plant is susceptible, then at the end the plant may get damaged, but they are compromised in their development or the productivity. What will happen if this interaction is going on under the exposure of ionizing radiation? The fungus, the growth of fungus can be decelerated at high dose, or if it can be evolved as a higher virulence rate. And the virus can also be inactivated when there is high dose of ionizing radiation, though due to the chronic exposure, the diversity of virus may get increased. In presence of ionizing radiation, plant-symbiotic bacteria are not able to protect the host plant, and they make them more radiosensitive in such environment. So, what we see in our project here, if the plants are exposed to already ionizing radiation and they are given pathogen or pest stress, how these plants will respond, how they will behave to this additional stress factor. In general, we as a human, we cannot tolerate two stress together in the same way as we are dealing with one stress. So how the plants react? There are two possibilities. They may behave stronger, they may behave weaker. So what gives us think that the plant may behave stronger or weaker, they won't be seen. There is literature present over this topic where the ionizing radiation and biotic stress are interacting with each other. So why we assume it may decrease? There is a report from Dimitri et al. Where the 3 wheat cultivars were studied, and the seeds from the Chernobyl, the seedlings of the seeds from Chernobyl exclusion zone had 2-fold higher fungal infection than those seedlings that were grown from the seeds collected from control area. The plant in result had lower resistance. then what we can assume the immunity of the plant will get increased. The sunflower plants that were treated with chenopodium extract and fungal and gamma radiation, they were tolerating the fusarium fungus better than those that were not treated. So that gives a clue that the immunity of plant will also get increased if they will be exposed to anaerobic radiation. They could have better defense system. Then, to test our hypothesis, we are using fragments of trellis plants. They are also known as common breed. They are a helophytic veteran grass that belongs to Poaceae family. The ploidy range is highly variable. It varies from 3x to 12x, and they can reproduce both sexually as well as clonal propagation. However, clonal propagation is more common. They can survive extreme conditions from extreme haline to alkaline conditions, and they are a potent phytoremediation agent. Alternative species, biopolaris, are some potential pathogens of Phragmites frustration. These samples we collected from the Chernobyl region of Ukraine. We had two sampling sites as clean, two sampling sites as clean control sites, Pripyat River and water reserve near Skahulica, and Kibov Lake and Naziskin Lake as the contaminated samples. So, after collecting these samples from different sites, we have data that the two contaminated sites are indeed have higher radionuclide contamination than those from a clean lake. We have the samples, and to test our hypothesis, we plan to do the leaf sheath infection assay, genome size detection, protein profiling, expression analysis, quantification antioxidants, detection of cardinal proteins. So, first, I will start with the leaf sheath infection assay, where we check the interaction between the fungus and leaves. We took I prepared the fungal suspension and took the small section of leaf, interact them by preparing the fungus for 24 hours. Then stain this leaf with chalcophil white and visualize the microscope and analyze this image with or imagery. This is the example how the leaves were looking after the fungal infection. You can see here that these are the leaves from the leaf. You can easily see that how different is the infection of fungus from the leaves inside and look at that. All the samples we had, they were looking like this, a huge difference. And this is the graph from the collected data. You can see here that the leaves from the contaminated lake had higher fungal infection and those from the clean lake had lower fungal infection. The green and this yellowish green is the green samples will be green control samples in all slides, and this red and orange will be the contaminated samples in all the slides. Yeah. So as I told you that the ploidy level of breed varies a lot, we decided to and it also affects the response to different stress conditions. Tetrapolite reed are more responsive to biotic stress factors, whereas octapolite are more responsive to abiotic stress factors. So we decided to check what is the genome size of our sample. Here I took the leaf section and top them with a buffer. In the nuclei, by staining dye and visualize this them in flow cytometer. What we saw that all the samples we had the same ploidy level. So whatever results we are seeing in our study, they are not due to the effect of the genome size, but probably this is some effect of radionuclide contamination there. Then we decided to go for the protein profiling to see if there any change in the protein level at our samples or not. For this, we did the protein extraction through phenol-based method, digestion with filter columns, and purification through CPAP light voltage, and detected through ultra-high performance liquid chromatography mass spectrometry. Then, at the time I started with this project, there was no read genome or protein or transcriptome was available. So we found in a paper some data, we translated them to transcriptome into protein, and then we used that data to analyze our results. We used Mexican and Persian for this analysis. What we saw, we identified 1,867 proteins there, and among them, 1,350 proteins were reliably identified. Among all of them, 174 proteins were differentially identified. What we saw in the principal component analysis? There was huge variation of sampling variability on our samples than those of radionuclide contamination. You can see here the 1 million contaminated samples together, and these are the another clean samples and radiated samples. So there was major influence of this sampling variability. Then, though we have this major influence, we had few proteins that were affected with radionuclide that were showing clear differentiation. So we decided to do the hierarchical clustering from them. We prepared a few protein clusters. Some had the higher abundance in the clean lake and some had the lower abundance in the clean lake. From these clusters, we selected a few proteins based on their role in plant development and protection, and proceed further with it. These are the proteins that were selected from the cluster with higher abundance in contaminated lake. Then we did the expression analysis for these their coded genes. We designed the primer, did the real-time PCR, and analyzed. What we saw, there were few genes that were affected with this radionuclide contamination. You can see with the kirinase here, the kirinase was cumulatively higher in the samples from contaminated lake than those from clean lake. Same cases for sugar and transphase also, they are higher than in the radiated lake than those from the clean lakes. So these are they are the proteins that were downregulated in the contaminated location. You can see here, this putative papyrus is cumulatively higher in clean lake than radiated lake, and same for the chloroplast leukokinase. Then the question came if the plants have any prime defense system or not. To test that, we decided to measure their antioxidant activity. For that, I prepared a single link extract and measured 4 different antioxidants from the same catalase, ascorbate peroxidase, glutathione reductase, and glutathione transferase. What I saw from all these antioxidants that there was no change in the levels of antioxidant among different samples. We can see, we were assuming here that there was no prime defense system in the plants. They were not being regulated to fight with any stress there. Then, as there was no change in the antioxidant level, we were assuming that there might be some high oxidative stress in the plant. So we decided to detect the carbonyl proteins there. The part of this project was funded through the doctor grant. What is carbonylation? Protein carbonylation is an irreversible post-translational modification that is counted as a marker of protein damage because of its irreversibility. That is mainly occurs due to oxidative damage, disease, and aging, and these dysfunctional proteins are directed to the proteolytic part. How we were doing that, these carbonyl proteins were tagged with biotin, and then these enriched biotinized proteins were measured through LCMS. The sample preparation of this part has already been done, and we are still waiting for our instrument to do the measurement of this carbon-related factor. So this is the whole part of my project. We saw that the immunity of the plant is compromised because there was high infection in the leaves from the radiated lake. There was very minor change in the proteome, and there was no defined antioxidant changes in the plant, so they didn't have any prime defense system. Though the genes related with oxidative stress, which were influenced there, were affected there. So we came to the conclusion that due to the chronic exposure of energy radiation, plant immunity is compromised without any prime defense system. And the Phragmites australis is probably a radio-resistant plant species because we didn't see any major change in the proteome or transcriptome between when the samples were from clean lake or they were from the radiated lake. I have one publication also from my PhD. That's a review paper. Here we summarize the response of radiated plant and the response of radiated biotic factors and their interaction. Then currently we are drafting a manuscript of this whole research part. We are planning to submit it Journal of Experimental Botany. Apart from my PhD publication, I have 3 more publications from my previous research work, from bachelor, from master's, and my post-master's research experience. Then, after finishing the part of my PhD project, I decided to extend it a bit. We decided to check the stress movement of this aquatic plant in general. So, we planned to check to quantify the methyl transferases in these channel plants because they regulate the addition of removal of methyl transferase from transcription factors, and these methyl transferases are triggered. These methyl transferases trigger different changes in the plant. For this part of the project, I did through Erasmus at SEK in Belgium. At Belgium Nuclear Research Center, where the seeds collected in the kernel were exposed for 14 days to chronic radiation. And then after, in the meantime, there was no methyl transferase reported in the read. So I was searching those methyltransferases in rice and Arabidopsis last time with the real genome and designing the primers for them, then quantifying these methyltransferases to real time. We are still analyzing these results. After getting these results, we are planning to do the phylogenetic study, proteomic analysis, and then detection of DNA damage through comet assay, quantification of hormonal proteins, and estimation of antioxidant levels. For this whole project, I would like to acknowledge my supervisor, Dr. Maxine Danchiko, my colleague, Dr. Ola, for helping me in different parts of the project. We have different collaborators for this project, Dr. Dimitri Gutko, who were transporting the samples for us, Dr. Nele Hermans, who was helping me in Belgium, Dr. Peter Barrett, who was assisting us for the mass spec for LCMS, Dr. Stanislav Kizek, who helped me with this who is helping me with this comet assay, Dr. Stanislav Spaniel, who helped me with this flow cytometry, and others. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions about the nuclear disasters in planets? No? Does the ionizing radiation have any impact on the pathogens as well?
Yes, it does have. There were different pathogens studied there. In case of virus, they have high virulence and high diversity, even same for the funguses. Even some, it was observed in the wall of the nuclear reactor that they had the more myelinized fungus there, have ability to tolerate the ionizing radiation in human.
So in your study, you did not also the planets, the same
no, we have this, we have in our institute, so we check the potential pathogens for phragmites and then we expose them.
You just ask questions there, Michael.
I have questions about
graphs. I think graphs in radiation, but it was in days, months, years. I didn't. How you manage this?
Which graph?
Okay, so we received the sample, like about the results.
Yes, can you go back to any of the graphs?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Not this one, but
Was this one? Yeah. Okay. Actually, we received the samples from Chernobyl, and we had those samples, and we were analyzing them. These graphs are already going there from a long time, like since this radiation exposure. So they are from generation to generation. They are just there. So we collected them.
So there are people in the audience who might not have seen these types of graphs before. You know, work with them. So if you can walk us through one of them. For example, what are the error bars?
Okay, so for the, like
units, for example.
Okay, so this is the relative enzymatic activity that I calculated in comparison to the first control sample. So these are the okay, and then I calculated them in one. Then these I get 4 biological replications. So then the error bar is calculated. Is it clear?
Okay. And the error bars are what?
Error bar is like the deviation.
I know what it is, but is this standard deviation or standard error? Standard error. How many samples do you have per bar?
For this calculation, 4. 4 biological.
4. Okay. And then, and in the previous graphs as well?
Yeah.
It's only 4 in each one of them?
Yeah, 4 biological replicates for each location. There are 4 leukophils and 4 biological replicates for each.
Okay, and for this particular one, you said that they're the same.
Yeah, there was no significant difference.
Exactly, but that's different, right? You did not detect any statistically significant difference. Yes. It doesn't mean that they're the same.
There was no major changes.
I understand, but in order to show that they're the same, you would have to show that you have used different statistical tests to show that they're the same. That's a slightly different. I'm just saying. Because you did the interesting, you showed me graphs. Yeah. So now I'm going to talk about the graphs. Can you go back a few slides? Yeah, sure. I'll tell you. Go back. There was one interesting one. The first bar graph that you showed. Keep going. Yeah. That's... Nope. More.
This was the first one.
Yeah.
Okay, this one.
That one. So when you were evaluating this graph, right? So also these are standard errors on the error bars. There's four data points in each bar.
In this one, we had the leaves collected. So for each, I tried to take at least 10 leaf sections because for fungus, 4 biological replicates are not enough. So I took 10 leaf sections. Yeah, I took 10 leaf sections for each condition, and then I took at least 15 images of each leaf, and then I calculated.
Right, so each bar contains 15 data points from the same leaf.
Each bar contains 15 data points from same leaf, and there was at least 10 leaf sections.
Okay.
150.
All right, and then you compare the difference. You compare each bar with the other ones.
Yes. So here, the same calculate, I used one because it was related fluorescence intensity. Control one I used to calculate all as a respective. So to show you how much fold they are related.
Right. So in this, we have 4 bars. Right? So we have like 6 comparisons. Right? The first one is 3, the second one 2, then 1. So that compare each to every other.
Yes.
Okay. So did you correct the multiple comparisons?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so why, so for example, well, if you look at the first, so the green is not different from the yellow-green.
Yes.
And the yellow-green is not different from the red one. So the first one, when I'm looking at the graph, right? So the first one is not different from the second one. The second one is not different from the third one. And yet, the first one is different from the third one. Yes. What's wrong with that?
Well, the point is the first green and second green, they both are the control diagram.
I understand, but did you compare them together?
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm not taller than the other guy is not taller than the third guy, why am I taller than the third guy?
The calculation I did with this.
I understand. This is the danger of statistical tests, right? So so the green one is not different than the yellow one. The yellow one is not different than the red one. So why is the green one different than the red one? What I'm telling you, it could happen, obviously, but this is not the way to show it, right? And this is not strong enough statistical evidence to convince me that the red one is taller than the green one. It's based on this graph. That's what I'm saying. Like, just nitpicking. No, it's people who are from our institute know me, so and it's common, right? The same way when you go to your other graphs, right? You probably did correct for multiple comparisons in one graph, right? But you have many graphs on the same page, and one of them, on a few of them, you show that you have p-value of 0.04 or something. If you have a p-value of 0.04, how likely do you think it is that it's actually a real difference?
Sorry, what?
If you have a p-value here, right? I'm showing that p-value is 0.022. How likely do you think there's a real difference between those bars? What's your estimate? Yeah, what probability there actually is a difference between the red and the based on this?
What's
I estimate about 30%, 30 to 40%. So how likely it is that you actually found a difference? How likely is it that the red one is actually taller than the green one? It's not 98%. It's closer to 40%. So there's a higher chance that there is no difference, and there is a difference just based on the Just point it out.
I might actually really fun because this direction is going in the direction. What sort of 40% are you talking about? It's 2%.
No.
Yes.
No. The p-value is 2%. But the probability that the red one is actually taller than the green one is far from that.
Based on what?
It's based on the way how the statistical tests work.
Sorry, let me see this. Well, it says that there is 3% chance that the difference you see is random.
No, if they're the same. If they're the same, the difference is random. Well, the probability of difference is 2% if they're all the same.
Okay,
which is not the same thing as saying that one of them is different than the other.
You're saying me that if I'm getting p-value 0.002 for Taki, that the probability that they are different is 40%?
Yes.
Based on what?
Based on that, because you're missing one thing. This is the same thing as when you have sensitivity or specificity of tests, right?
Oh.
I'm not interested how sensitive the test is. I'm interested how likely I actually have a disease, or how likely I see a difference when I see the outcome of the test. One thing that's missing from this, all the statistical tests we're doing, is that we don't know how often these things actually occur. That's a difference between statistical testing, the typical statistical testing we do, and Bayesian testing. Because one thing we don't include in the statistical testing is we don't know how often these things happen.
This is not Bayesian statistics.
Well, exactly, it isn't. But these numbers don't tell us how likely it is that these are actually different. They tell us how likely we are to see these things in random if they're the same. So, we should discuss it afterwards. I'll show you. I'll show you. We'll discuss it.
Thank you.
It's any other question? Yes. Let's start.
Thank you. My name is Friday, and I wanted to say something. This little discussion, the clarification for that will help you if you could plot your graph by showing a kind of the axis that show maybe the number of days or the number of time, or maybe it's in day or in week, and then the vertical axis can show a kind of maybe the probability value, maybe a relative value for that. But I have a different question, and my question, if it's not based on hallucination, I heard you saying something about principal component analysis. Yeah, but I didn't see any result concerning principal component analysis.
Yeah.
Rory?
Yes.
Okay. Can you go there? Let me see. Okay. Okay. You have this graph here is for your principal component analysis. But beside this graph, do you have any other numerical results to support this from the principal component?
Yes, so from those results, we prepared these divided this principal component.
Is it here?
No, I don't know why I don't have them here. Like we had the proteins with these 174 differentially accumulated proteins. Then we prepared this graph. How many proteins are present according to their abundance, which location is more similar to others. So that's what we try to do here with this principal component analysis.
Okay, and why the choice for the principal component analysis?
It's just to see the clustering, if like how the proteins are clubbing together, if the two radiated conditions are behaving same or not. What we were expecting to see, but we saw something different. So we were, because these are the samples not grown in lab, but they are from the natural conditions. So we were assuming that there is high influence of other environmental factors also on the samples we collected, and that's why we see such kind of clustering here.
Okay, thank you.
Essentially, let's still do the easily separable.
Yeah.
So the Austin. So if there are no more questions, let me thank you again to Shubhi Mishra for her talk. And thanks again for the people who joined us online. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for coming. There should be pizza outside, so please go ahead, enjoy pizza in between those panels at our new campus, hopefully. Thank you.